Hello and welcome to the first LLG Grapevine podcast of 2026. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Helen. Hello, everyone.
Now, Dennis, I don't know about you. I feel it's a strange start to this year. It already feels like it's absolutely chock-a-block. Will we see local government elections? Looks dubious. We've got more on that later.
Yep.
The continuation of reorganisation. We've got funding settlements, changes to council tax, fair funding reform, changes to the local government pension scheme. We've got the Employment Rights Act. That was enacted in December. Things will be dripping through from that. Big changes in April. Consultations in regards to planning. We've got the MPPF. It seems constantly to be in a consultation.
Yes.
And the sector can also expect best value changes to be proposed. And I suspect the guidance on that probably will be around spring time. So there's lots going on. But as usual, the Grapevine concentrates on a consolidated view of some of the highlights from the past LLG bulletin and your essential roundup of all things good to know, isn't it, Dennis? So where are we going first?
Well, indeed. I thought we'd start with a quick roundup, things that you may have missed, particularly in relation to government legislation and announcements. It's been a few weeks since the last bulletin in December. Some important things have happened, so here's this quick canter through the headlines on what government has been doing, just in case, as I say, in case you missed them. First, on legislation, of course, we've had the Employment Rights Act 2025, and despite 11th hour controversy in the Lords, the Employment Rights Act 2025 has now been enacted, with the government saying it will bring an end to fire and rehire and fire and replace practices and an end to 0 hours contracts. Under the Act, employees will obtain day one rights to paternity leave, unpaid parental and bereavement leave, allowing some 32,000 more fathers and partners each year to take paternity leave, and 1.5 million more parents to take unpaid parental leave, according to the government. And alongside this, there will be enhanced protections against dismissal for pregnant women and new mothers, and a strengthening of statutory sick pay.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the Planning and Infrastructure Act now. This is now on the statute book. The government is saying the new act will slash delays and costs to get homes and critical infrastructure built faster. It contains sweeping measures to accelerate reservoirs and prioritise electricity connections to drive growth, create high-paying jobs, and the government says bolster homegrown clean energy. Now, the new law is at the heart of government plans to build their 1.5 million new homes and meet, they say, 150 decisions target on major infrastructure. It's also going to, they hope, the government hopes that is, modernise planning committees to, quote, focus on the most significant developments rather than small projects to speed up local decisions on new homes.
And next we have the Mental Health Act 2025. The new Mental Health Act has now received royal assent, meaning it's now law, delivering on a key manifesto commitment. It will reform the outdated Mental Health Act of 1983, which provides the legal framework to detain and treat people in a mental health crisis who are at risk of harm to themselves or others. The modernised Act will implement urgent reforms which experts have been calling for almost a decade, including significant new legal duties for local authorities to promote mental health well-being, to reduce stigma and provide accessible services, requiring annual reports on all progress made.
Yep, and now let's take a look at some of the government announcements. There were two announcements, I think, that caught our attention, Dennis.
Yes.
The first, it's election delays, and actually we're going to deal with this at the end of the podcast, and we are likely to produce a vlog next week in more detail because it's important. But you'll remember in our last vlog, we discussed the serious issues facing councils that are, quote, left behind when their mayoral elections are to be postponed from 26 to 2028. Despite heavy criticism of these postponements, there are likely to be more delays. We'll pick this up in a bit, but that's the first one. What's the second one, Dennis?
Yeah, well, the government has also just announced that councils that are merging into unitary authorities have expressed concerns about their capacity to reorganise in time. The government has indicated that 63 council areas could postpone elections until 2027, with some already delayed till May 2026. Local Government Minister Alison McGovern, and I know you'll come on to deal with this, stated that councils will be listened to regarding their ability to manage elections alongside reorganisation. A consultation exercise is now underway, but Helen, we're talking here of potential delays affecting some 10 million voters. No surprise that the Electoral Commission has voiced criticism, as you come on to say later.
Yeah, and there's no surprise there. Finally, I think for this segment, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has launched, as I mentioned earlier, a consultation on a fuller and more definitive overhaul of the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF. Now, in an oral statement in the House of Commons, the Minister of Housing and Planning, who's Matthew Pennycook, he said, I'll just quote what he said: "This wholly restructured framework maintains and builds on the initial revisions we made in December last year. It includes a range of new measures to support key economic sectors and incorporates new, clear and rules-based national policies for the making of both plans and decisions." The planning plan, I think I take my hat off to planning lawyers having to deal with that and all the changes that have happened. But all the detail on these items is, of course, in the latest bulletin. Now, every 2 weeks, LLG produces a bespoke LLG Welsh bulletin for our colleagues in that wonderful part of the UK. So what's going on in Wales, Dennis?
Well, yes, there's this Infrastructure Wales Act to 2024, the Consequential Amendments Order, which has come into force and establishes a new single consenting process for certain types of major projects, including railways, airports, treatment plants and reservoirs, and replaces the Development of National Significance provisions. The Act comprises 7 parts, with Part 1 dealing with when how a development should be defined as a significant infrastructure project. Parts 2 to 6 relate to various matters about how to obtain and how decisions are made around the consent, and the final part dealing with enforcement, such as when consent has not been permitted. Let's take a look first at 2 relevant consultations.
Yeah, so the Remuneration Board has launched its consultation on the draft determination for the 7th Synod. The consultation will run from the 15th of December, just gone, to the 4th of February this year. So there's still time to respond to it. The draft determination has been simplified, and several of the underlying principles and controls in the determination have been reviewed. Now, the consultation document also seeks views on a limited number of policy proposals and inflationary uplifts to salaries and budgets for 26-27. Now, the board has already taken, I would say, the majority of its policy decisions for the determination, including members' pay, which were published back in July of last year. And you can find those, listeners can find those incorporated as an annex to the determination dated 25/26.
Yes, indeed. Now, the other consultation relates to the Code of Conduct for members of the Senate. This is a result of its work on individual member accountability and dignity and respect, and the Standards of Conduct Committee has been considering the Code of Conduct to ensure that it remains relevant in its evolving Parliament. It is intended that a revised Code of Conduct will be presented to the Senate before the end of the 6th Senate, so that it applies from the first day of the 7th Senate. Now, there's still time to submit views, as the consultation does not close until the 30th of January.
It'll be interesting to take a look at that code and compare and contrast it actually to the Parliament in London. But also in terms, I was just thinking, in terms of the code that we might start to think about for local government, because it does look like,
yes.
Yeah, I know there'll be differences, but please do take a look at the Welsh Bulletin, where you'll find a link to the Welsh Government's draft budget as well. But it's always interesting to look at the other jurisdictions if you're not based in Wales. There's always good lesson learning, I think, from looking at what's going on. Yeah.
I would say in some respects, frankly, particularly on having on standards, there are major differences, but interesting takes on some of the issues that we face in England.
Completely, completely. Now, Dennis, let's move on and take a look at, well, a long case that's causing a lot of consternation. It's been headlining for some time now. We've mentioned it a lot. It's Mazur.
Yes, and we're bound to mention it again in the coming weeks, aren't we? The Mazur case was in the headline news again just before Christmas. First, the Law Society is to make representations in the Court of Appeal over the contested Mazur ruling. The solicitors' representative body confirmed before Christmas that it has been granted permission to be joined as a respondent in the appeal. The parties are waiting for further directions and a hearing date from the court.
Well, we might have a bit of news on that, but by way of reminder, the case obviously has been widely discussed in the legal profession since Mr. Justice Sheldon handed down his ruling last September. Now, the judge stated that the position as set out in the Legal Services Act was that litigation could only be conducted by authorised people and not by unauthorised people who were under supervision.
Exactly. Now, this appeared to contradict advice and guidance given to firms in recent years, and also called into question the business model developed by many litigation firms, whose business models have relied heavily on unauthorised legal executives and paralegals. Now, both the Law Society and the Solicitors Regulation Authority were listed as intervening parties in the High Court hearing in Mazur and another against Charles Russell Speechley's LLP.
Yeah. Well, during that hearing, the Society's analysis was that there are certain activities among the services that have traditionally been supplied by solicitors that may only be carried on by persons who have been authorised to do so or who are exempt under the Legal Services Act. Now, the Society submitted to the court that whether or not a person supporting or assisting a solicitor to conduct litigation, whether or not they're conducting litigation themselves, is a question of fact and degree, and that's the bit which is
Yes.
not clear, I think.
Yes, and the Society contended that the service of process, preparing bundles and searches, were mechanical functions which have never been regarded as ancillary steps amounting to the conduct of litigation. The Society further argued in the High Court Mazur hearing that it was in the public interest for authorised individuals rather than authorised entities or organisations to be in control of and have responsibility for litigation.
Yeah, and it's been announced that the Court of Appeal will hear the Mazur case in February, after the matter was expedited. So the appeal from the Chartered Institute of Legal Executives in Mazur, they're bringing the appeal. That will begin on the 24th of February. I'm not clear how long it's been listed for. Oh no, I do. I beg your pardon. There's an estimated time of 4.5 hours for
Yes, I think that's right.
yeah.
And the case has been brought forward, I think, because of its significance to the legal profession, to the legal sector, as we've both recognised, was bound to be the case, Helen, I think.
And it's LLG do have a plan. We've been meeting with the working groups. We've been meeting with all the regulators, and as I've previously reported, the Legal Services Board. We're going to be writing out to members this week, letting them know what our strategy is. But please rest assured, we'll definitely be looking at the employment angle. We will be looking at well, we're scheduling a bespoke webinar to go through all the different types of things, or a lot of the things that local government do to identify who can do what, because obviously there's concerns around what officers can do in terms of our client departments. We'll also be looking at the practical effects of day-to-day work within local government, but crucially, we will be moving on to lobbying to influence changes to the Legal Services Act, because essentially local government just needs to be treated completely different to that of private practice. And the aims and objectives and the institution itself of local government and what it's there to do under statute really ought to be thought about in a different way, would be LLG submission. So that's coming. Let's move on to other news. We have touched on this. The government's planning and infrastructure bill that received royal assent, as we said, it's now an act. Actually, it was the 18th of December, which I believe was the same day as the Employment Rights
It is, and also the announcement from Alison McGovern that we referred earlier to on elections. It had a busy day on the 18th of December, Helen.
Yeah, they were getting it in before Christmas, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
interesting.
employment rights bill. I mean, that at one point that was supposed to be the summer, wasn't it? But
Yes, and they had big issues in the House of Lords, which um, now clearly have been resolved. But back to the planning and infrastructure bill that you mentioned, the government's position on this, their expectation is that the Act will remove blockages and delays in the planning system, accelerating the construction of tens of thousands of new homes across every region, and get dozens of new roads, railway lines, wind farms, and key critical infrastructure built quicker, all while securing a win-win for the environment and the economy.
well, they're bold claims, Dennis. I'm gonna
Yes.
argue if you look negative, okay? So the positive commentary states that the Act streamlines housing and infrastructure delivery, accelerates clean energy products, and reforms planning processes. And it's going to introduce national delegation schemes, mandatory training. That's interesting. Environmental delivery
Mm.
plans, and updated compulsory purchase rules, aiming for faster development while raising concerns about local democracy and environmental safeguards.
Indeed. Well, for the sake of balance, we should look at what the criticisms have been about this through the process, and particularly in the Lords. Let's not forget, in the House of Lords, Baroness Coffey labelled the bill an affront to democracy, while Baroness Scott objected to councillors losing voting rights on individual applications, with sharp increases in rural housing targets and doubts over the 1.5 million home target. And of course, CPRE and others, such as Civic Voice, have warned that the national delegation scheme in effect sidelines public engagement and diminishes the powers of elected councillors and statutory consultees.
Yeah, at the time of the bill, I recall that the argument was that it transfers decision making from democratically elected committees to unelected planning officers, and also gives broader powers to the Secretary of State. And I believe there were also concerns around, quite strong concerns actually, around the erosion of environmental protections, and we did discuss that, Dennis, previously.
We did.
Let's see how it plays out.
Yes,
What we can do. Now, these seem to come around quicker and quicker. I think it's because I'm getting old, but
I am too. Yes, I think we always take a look at what's coming out of the Ombudsman's office, and it's, as you say, the times come round when they've published their latest Ombudsman annual report, the report for 2025. So let's go on this. During 2024-25, the local government and social care ombudsman dealt with 22,010 complaints and inquiries, seeing a 15% increase in the number of new complaints registered for a second consecutive year. Now, of the 4,441 complaints in which it carried out a detailed investigation, the Ombudsman upheld 83%. Now, these figures are part of the Ombudsman's annual report and accounts for the year 2024 to 25, and these were presented to Parliament on, guess when? 18th of December.
okay. Actually, now there's something resonating with me that 83% of upheld. I think that's less than historically, because at one point we were in the 90s for upheld
It's
complaints.
funny you should say, yes, I recall that too. You're right.
Uh,
Um,
I mean, it's
it's
still not
bleak,
good.
but not as bleak as it was. Yes.
I mean, it's not something to jump around about, but
No.
I think it has gone down. Um,
Yes.
in the report, within the annual report, of course, the local government and social care ombudsman is Ahmed Clark, highlighted the major milestone of publishing the Triennial Review 24-27, which articulated concerns around the systemic nature of issues seen by the Ombudsman in local services, particularly in education, housing, and adult social care. And in 2024 to 25, the Ombudsman completed 90% of investigations within 26 weeks. And after making any recommendations to remedy injustice, more than 99% were carried out to the Ombudsman's satisfaction. So that is at least good, because it means people get
Mm.
resolution.
Indeed. The year also included the publication of 9 thematic reports to help improve local government services, including focus reports on fostering and adoption services, and on cases where people fell through gaps due to bureaucracy between local health and social care service providers. The Ombudsman Office also published good practice guides for council officers on medical assessments in housing services, domestic abuse when considering homelessness and housing decisions, and also household waste offences. Ombudsman Chief Executive Julie Odoms said the increase in the number of complaints made to us over 2 years shows there is a growing need from the public for us to look into their concerns about the services that they receive.
Yeah, and I'll just make a correction, Dennis, actually, on something I said, because, of course, the Ombudsman is indeed Amadip Samal. I don't know why I said Clark. Might have been something to do with watching Superman over Christmas, but the way my brain works. But yeah, Amadip Samal, of course, is the Ombudsman.
Yes, yes.
Now, the Minister of State for Local Government and Homelessness, this is quite contentious, has written, and we referenced it earlier, has written to council leaders in relation to the 2026 local elections. Nobody could have missed this, really, because it's been everywhere.
Has.
Broadly speaking, Alison McGovern, who's the minister, said that the government is advancing plans to replace the two-tier local government system with single-tier unitary councils to improve efficiency, reduce costs and strengthen local leadership. And all 20 invited areas have submitted proposals, with consultations underway for 17 proposals and further consultations planned for February on the remaining 14 areas. And the indicative timetable aims for elections to new councils in May 27, with implementation by April 2028.
And she also said that in view of the complexity of reorganisation and the strain on councils managing this alongside the scheduled May 2026 elections, the government is considering postponing these elections for 1 year where councils raise capacity concerns. Now, councils are invited to submit views by the 15th of January, explaining whether postponement would help ensure a smooth transition and avoid unnecessary costs for elections to councils that may soon be abolished. And the Secretary of State said she will adopt a locally led approach, acting only where councils request postponement. Town and parish council elections, however, will proceed as scheduled.
Yeah, well, McGovern said that the government acknowledges preparations for May 2026 elections may have begun and commits to providing certainty quickly. The letter was copied to chief executives, other council leaders, MPs, went to combined authority mayors, police and crime commissioners, and best value commissioners, only in reorganisation areas, however.
Yes. Now, I think you mentioned this earlier, but the Electoral Commission has warned that the timing and substance of the elections are unsuitable, emphasising that capacity issues are not a sufficient reason for delaying scheduled elections. And it argues that postponements themselves risk eroding legitimacy and public confidence, and highlights the conflict in allowing councils to decide their own postponement.
Well, yes, and opposition politicians have accused Labour of collusion to avoid accountability. Now, Paul Holmes, he's a Conservative, compared ministers to the Grinch, quote, stealing elections. And James Cleverly has emphasised that elections were promised, but are now being cancelled. Now, over Christmas, a public petition, and it went fast, Dennis. There was over.
It did.
Yeah.
Within a matter of weeks, 135,000 people have signed up and thereby have forced a debate to take place in the Commons on this.
And I think, as we said earlier, this is a really important issue. I know the Association of Electoral Administrators have had things to say about it. So we'll
Yes.
it next week in a bespoke vlog, I think, Dennis.
Yes, and we need to follow this, Helen. And once we know which authority elections are taking place, of course, our members will also get to know immediately.
Absolutely. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 1, available on the LLG website now. Bulletin 1 of 2026. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Goodbye now.